Welcome back, listeners. Another podcast. And today, got somebody very, very, very special in my personal life as well as professional. He was a young man. He's now getting a little bit older, like us all. But we've got a huge history, and I'm really pleased to say it's Robert Fordree, who's now the Executive Vice President Cargo for Menzies Aviation. And it's an absolute privilege, honestly, and an honour, and I'm so looking forward to this little chat, Rob, and especially when we elaborate on the genuinely true story when you won a trophy as a young lad, but you won it incorrectly, and your dad, who I know very well as well, who'll get a mention later on, insisted that you give it back. So I can imagine how heartbreaking that was for you, but we'll cover that later. So
I'm sure we will. You're one of the few people in the world that knows that story, Chris. So there's quite a few others that are about to realise that as well.
Yeah, they're going to know a lot. They're going to know a lot about you by the end of this, Rob. So
that's what I'm a bit nervous about. So
don't worry.
Let's see.
Right. Firstly, Rob, kicking it off. Why did you agree to come on the podcast?
Because you told me to. So I have to follow instruction from you, clearly.
Good enough. Yeah. Well, I'll accept that one.
No, I was very keen to come and do it. Actually, I must admit, I've had a carefully constructed veneer over a number of years, and that might start falling apart now as I talk to you. But I'm sure it'll be good fun.
It will, and we'll bring a few things out. Now, right, one of the things. If anybody says your name in my presence, I always say I knew him when he didn't know what he was going to be himself.
Yep.
And
very true.
And that was a little bit like history repeating himself, because I used to work for your dad way back in Lufthansa.
Yep. And
I remember one moment that changed my life, which was in the toilets. And nothing.
Where are you going with this?
No. It's all right. Nothing. John's got his reputation intact. But by chance, I was in the toilet, and your dad came in, and he was the boss at the time. And we're doing what you do in the men's urinals, and he looked across at me, and I looked back at him, and he kept looking at me, and he said, "You're a bit of a lad," he said, "but you need to knuckle down and sort yourself out." And then he went, washed his hands, and he went, and I was still standing there holding my troubles, and I thought to myself, what did he mean by that? And yeah, I soon found out.
Yeah. But
he's one of the few people who gave me a good solid steer very early on.
So the way that evolved, so I then started at Lufthansa. I started working for you. He realised that and gave me a quiet little word as well as to how I should manage things with you.
And never come into the toilet.
Never go into the toilet. Correct.
What did he say? What advice did he give you?
He said you need to be basically on your game. He said Chris is pretty sharp. He's a bit leery. Exactly those words again. But he said basically be on top of your game, because you know what you're talking about.
No, but he's a good. I still. How is he now? What's he doing now, Rob?
He's fine. He's retired. Sort of mid-70s. He comes up to see us in Edinburgh every now and then with my mum. But he's quite happy retired. He still gets stressed about stuff, but he's definitely retired.
Oh, well, make sure, please give him my very, very best and sincerest wishes and regards.
Yeah, I will do.
So, Rob, now let's go right where. How did your career start to go? When did you realise that things were going to change for you?
When did I realise things were going to change for me? Probably the decision to go live and work in the Middle East. And there's going to be a running theme through this chat, Chris, because you seem to be an influencing factor on a lot of these things as well. So
I'll suck it up, Rob. Don't worry about it. You just say what you want to say.
Sure,
I've got a family at home as well who wonder what I've done with my career.
So I think the big change was going to live and work in the Middle East. You know, I never had any intention to live and work abroad. I'd been at Heathrow for about 20 years. Had a house near there. Family was growing up there as well, and things were pretty good. I joined Etihad, had a couple of years working at Heathrow, looking after Europe and the Americas on the operational side. And then I had an opportunity to go to the Middle East. And actually, funny story, I'd done 2 years with Etihad. There was one particular day where I went home and I sat in the garden with my wife and said, the job I'm doing at the moment's okay. I'm kind of ticking along. It's all right. Next step up is probably going to be in Abu Dhabi to go to the headquarters. What do you think? and we sat in the garden. We had a bottle of wine, and in the end, we said, "Okay, let's go for it. Let's see what happens." And literally the very next day, I had a phone call, completely unplanned, to say there might be an opportunity in Abu Dhabi. Would you come? I think it was you on that phone call as well.
Yeah. No, I remember it well, but I remember way back beyond that, Rob.
Yep.
Okay, and I'm not just doing it just to have a bit of fun or pull your leg or whatever, but one of the themes and one of the things that we want to do with this particular show is we're starting off just getting to know people in the industry and see what their thoughts are and how they got to where they were, etc. But one of the ambitions or the aims behind it is to attract the next generation and younger girls, younger guys, younger people, just to come into the industry and realise what a great industry it is, and to listen how certain people got to where they are and how they reflect on then bringing the next group forward.
Yep.
So it's like passing it on. But I remember talking to you when you, I can't even remember how young you would have been then. 20, 21,
Probably
19?
Possibly even less than that, yeah.
Yeah. And I remember looking at the way things were going and it was too difficult to have supervisory or oversight on so many things, and I wanted to introduce a peer auditing concept, and I asked you to come in, and you were the first one I asked to come in.
Yep.
And I asked you who was the best at a particular task, and I remember you looked and you pondered for a little while, and then you said, me. And I said, yes, you are.
Yep.
And I said, now who would be the best person to check that everybody else was doing it to the same standard as you? And who would be the one who should be responsible for teaching them, showing them and explaining to them why they had to do it in that same consistent way?
Yep.
And it was you.
Yep.
And then I remember saying, you now have to go away and come up with a little simple concept that you would explain to everybody and then tell them that you would be checking on them or verifying and validating over a period of time.
Yeah.
Remember what you said?
I do. How difficult is that going to be? So that was the first rung on a sort of leadership challenge that came over many years after that as well. But that was the first big step. But always the first step is the hardest as well. Yeah.
But it was but what I'm saying is I was so confident that you were able to do it, and you got a very nice nature about you, so it wouldn't have been a Larry Large, people being upset with it. Yeah. But it didn't matter how old or how young somebody was, if they're seen and recognised as doing something well. Yeah. And that's
it was a long time ago. And so of course this is back in Lufthansa days when we worked together there as well, in London. But the team that we had in Lufthansa Cargo in those days was very, 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 very tight. We socialised a lot together. We were all doing shift work, so we socialised together. We went away on trips together. So to then be asked to go and what I interpreted was to go and check up on my friends. That was tough. That was tough. But then when you realise it's part of the sort of management cycle, it's part of development, it's part of what people need. Yep. It was fine. It was great, and it was a great opportunity.
And don't you think that? And now, as your career's progressed, and you've been responsible for lots of different teams, people, regions. Yeah. Don't you think that it's still a problem where we don't tell people why we're giving them a different job and increasing their responsibilities? We tell them what we want them to do. Yep. And where we want them to do it and when, but we don't actually spend enough time teaching them why and giving them the tools so that they're able to take that away from, like you said, the social side or the friendship side, and that it's part of being a supervisor, a middle manager, a junior manager, then getting up to the higher levels.
So I agree, but I also think that individuals have to have that in them as well. Sometimes you need to nurture that a little bit, but they have to want to step up into a bigger role, into more supervisory or more management. They have to want to do that. But I don't think we've been very good at training or educating people in relation to that as well. That's probably the biggest challenge that we have from an industry perspective. We always talk about, if you're very good at supervising cargo or you're very good at loading bags on an aircraft, then you get offered an opportunity to go to be a supervisor. But as organisations, it's very rare that you actually train people in how to manage people.
Yeah, which is why they tend to be more comfortable with what they were doing rather than what they should be doing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then people think that they're not trusting their old colleagues.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
Correct.
no, it's a tough one.
Yep.
Now, another question for you. As you started to develop your career,
Yep.
what did you find as the biggest challenges?
Find as the biggest challenges. I think it was probably continuing to want the next job upwards. So for me, when I started realizing that actually I wanted to pursue my career, because when I started, I actually had no idea what I wanted to do. You know, I joined Lufthansa Cargo as a trainee on a youth trainee scheme that the government in the UK ran a long time ago. But I largely joined because I didn't know what I wanted to do when I left school. And then after a few years, then I realised that actually this is the career that I wanted. I actually wanted to move really quickly. And sometimes you need to put the time in to learn the basics, whether it's about operational or whether it's about commercial elements. You can't just drop in and do a little bit and move on and expect to get the biggest job. So you've got to put the time in. So for me, it was about having to put the brakes on a little bit in terms of not pursuing the career too quickly.
And how do you feel that is now with again with the younger generations, with all the pressures of social media and everything?
Yeah.
Do you not think they want things now even quicker?
Oh, absolutely. And there's almost a sort of an expectation that they come in at a level, at a much more senior level than you would normally expect. And I think there's some fantastic people out there. I think there's some very, very clever young people. I think there's people that come with different ideas that are not preconceived about how we do things, and I'm particularly talking about the cargo industry as well. But I do think there is an element where you need to work the operation, you need to understand what it's like, even if it's to work out that what we're doing is wrong and we need to do something different. You've got to learn it, you've got to live it a little bit.
So you'd agree, like patience is, everybody says, no, be patient, but if there's clarity and there's opportunity,
yeah,
it's one of the best things, because if you do go too early, it's it can be more of a problem.
Patience, absolutely, and you bide your time, and I genuinely believe that the good people and the right people get recognised, and they stand out, and they get moved on into bigger and better roles. That
was a lovely self-promotional plug there, Rob, because you were very patient. You left Menzies once, and you patiently waited to re-arrive. And now you're back with them. Yeah. How did that come about?
So I was as I mentioned, I was working for Lufthansa. Lufthansa did a joint venture with Menzies in the UK, and I moved over to the Menzies side. So I hadn't applied for a job. I just kind of transitioned. It was part of the JV, and then I moved into a bigger commercial role with Menzies. Still, after about 20 years worth of career, I'd not applied for any other job. I just kind of moved internally into the roles. And then I left Menzies, and I went to join Etihad. So that was the first change. And I did the operational activity, and then I ended up moving to Abu Dhabi. Worked closely with you for a couple of years. You moved on. I took over the role as head of the cargo operations for Etihad, so looking after the hub and the network. And for me, I learned so much there. With Etihad, it was being in a place where you're not on your own, but you have to get on with things, and you have to find a way to do things, because there isn't a huge amount, or certainly at that time there wasn't a huge amount of support structure around you. So you have to get on with it. And I learned so much. I did 8 years in Abu Dhabi. It would probably take me 28 years to learn all the things I learned somewhere else. And that really set me up to come back to the UK. Wanted to come back to the UK for my children and their education. So we came back, and the role that I saw within Menzies was kind of perfect at the time for me. But I wouldn't have been ready for that role. I wouldn't have been set up for that role if I hadn't done the time in Etihad and hadn't been through that whole cargo operational piece and all the learning that went with that. So.
And the early boot camp years.
The early boot camp years, yes, yeah.
But I remember that fondly, Rob. I remember we went on a flight and we interviewed a load of guys.
Yep.
And both of us playing sport, we said the most important thing to do is put a good team together.
Yep.
And make sure you've got the key positions and people who can play off each other, get on with each other, not not necessarily not compete with each other, but in a positive way, not the wrong way.
Yeah,
and I remember that was a lot of fun.
It was, and I think the thing that I remember most about that from what you said was, you need to realise that once you have your perfect team in place, it doesn't last forever.
Yep.
Because each of those individuals has got skills, which means they're going to move on into bigger and better roles. So it's almost as soon as you got that team in place, it's the beginning of the end of that team.
Yep.
But you just have to keep adding to it, and you have to keep bringing in the right people, the like-minded people that have got.
And enjoy the building process, because once you've built it, somebody else is either going to want it, or they're going to entice people to go and change.
And you've had that team in place, and the individuals, based on the strength of that team, you're always going to be in contact with those individuals. So you and I have sort of interacted on and off for the last few years. There's other people within that team as well that have moved on to other roles, and we're still in contact with. Some of them are competitors, some of them are colleagues, but you do remember fondly those times as well.
And it was
good team.
I remember the very first big conference we did, where we invited all the GHAs from around the world into Etihad, and we put that conference together, the new team and stuff. And for those that attended, I hope they enjoyed. But what they didn't see is the fun we had during and after each of the sessions. And so going back to that team, there was so it was Chrissy Beale, Russell Williams, Roy Gadsby, Michael Gamelgard, Andre Black. Now Andre's there. He's so now head of cargo. So
three generations of head of cargo operations between you, me, and Andre. So.
So it's and if any of you are listening, it was a wonderful time. We had great fun, and thanks very much for everything that you did.
Absolutely.
I also remember saying something to you, which was, you have to learn all the tough issues to enjoy when it's going well. And we spent a lot of time looking at risk and continuity and contingency. And I'm very proud, Rob, with the concept that we came up back then, which was the PHP platform. And I also remember the fun that we had with that. But I was also surprised that we did something like that, and it had such an impact on many of our suppliers. And I think it's a clear sign that if you do work together and you come up with a simple system, it can be very effective.
Agreed. And I remember when we did create PHP and the various things that it's been called in different carriers since then as well. But sat in a hotel bar in Abu Dhabi with my laptop on my knees. You eating a burger and giving me a download from your brain of all the stuff that we should put in, and we had a very, very long list of things that we wanted handlers to do at the end of that, and then crafting that into something that we then sent around the world, really. So,
Rob,
good.
Why did you have to mention a burger?
Because most of the time that I've spent with you, having meals with you, you scan the menu. And generally you end up on a burger.
Right, that has absolutely crucified me. And when Kathy hears that, she's going to say, "I told you so." Right, Rob, you're going to get it now, mate. So I'm going to bring some things up.
She only gets the truth. Go on.
I'm going to bring some things up now. Remember the football games that we used to have in Abu Dhabi? Do you remember when we played against all the support services?
I do. Yep.
Hey?
I remember you getting a little bit overexcited, somewhat competitive. I remember you taking out a few of our younger colleagues with scything tackles because you couldn't quite keep up with them as well. That was always quite amusing.
No, that was because they called me Burger Boy, Rob.
There you go.
Now just remember.
There you go.
No,
but remember, I couldn't see that too much because I was playing up front and you were playing at the back, so we couldn't shout at each other. We were too far away.
Yeah, no, but it was a great time, Rob. Now, and also, if anybody at Menzies wants to give me a congratulatory telephone call or email for preparing the next superstar in their organisation, feel free, guys. Absolutely no problem.
I'm sure they'd be delighted.
I'm sure they will. Now, Rob, what sort of challenges do you see ahead?
For the business?
Yeah.
So I think as we sit here today, the biggest challenge from a cargo perspective is cargo volumes at the moment. I think we all know that the business is cyclical, so it goes up and down. But we're unfortunately in a phase at the moment, and I think so for the next 18 months or perhaps even longer, the cargo volumes are going to be a little bit soft. So we have to plan accordingly. I think that's the biggest challenge from a cargo perspective over the next couple of years.
Good move, moving from commercial to operations, huh?
A great plan, yeah.
Yeah, you've always had good timing, son.
Great plan.
Ain't your fault now, is it?
But it's operations and commercial in the new role that I've got as well. So I have to focus on both.
Yeah, good man. Now, things that you've seen in the past, and you've seen some good successes. You've seen some people that have, inspired you. Who mentored you, or who would you like to say thank you? And I'm not looking for a little bit of recognition.
It's a leading question.
No, but seriously, because one of the things that we've asked everybody, well, it is really, but you can say that now, because I know the answer, you know the answer, but now everybody else will as well. Yeah. But we've been asking people who mentored them, and how important was it to be mentored in an early stage of your career? Yeah. And then what are you going to do? How do you pass it on?
Yeah. So for me, you've mentioned my dad. So my dad was a Lufthansa cargo employee as well. I actually ended up working in the same building that he used to run, which was a bit difficult in the early stage of my career as well. I must admit, I was always John's boy. Yeah. And then there was a guy that was running the UK cargo business, Bob Bingley, which a lot of people will remember from cargo. He was probably my first mentor as such, if it wasn't my dad, because my dad was always very helpful. And Bob was inspirational for a lot of people, and he certainly helped me. And I moved from operational roles into commercial roles largely because he said, I think this is what you can do. And then as I moved into a couple of different roles, that's where I started hooking up with you a lot more. And yes, I can safely say to the listeners that you've been quite an influence on my career.
Yes, Robert. I've been waiting for a long time for that.
There you go. I didn't say positively. I just said influence.
Yeah. That'll do.
And for me, that's been enormously beneficial. Someone that you can, even if you don't know how to respond to an email or you've got a particular challenge, you can talk it through. And you don't necessarily need someone to say, this is what you do. You need someone to say, well, have you thought about this? Or this is the implications, or how would you do it? And to phrase it for you and help you. And you've always done that to a certain degree for me, which has been fantastic. Right. And then...
I'm filling up here now, so
I'm going to stop now.
I've got the Anki out.
The next step is then what can I do for other people in the same way? So when I was in Abu Dhabi, Etihad started a mentoring program for some of the younger Emiratis, and I was asked to be a mentor to two or three of those people, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. It was a fantastic experience, and I always thought, perhaps you're too young to be a mentor, and
Rob, anybody who's seen you look almost old as me now.
That's an outrageous slur. I don't think that's true at all. But it was great. It was great to be able to mentor people, and
it's lovely,
and to realise that actually you have got a bit of experience and you have got a bit of knowledge, and people do want to hear that, and you can help them. So I really enjoyed that. And there's a graduate program within Menzies as well. So I've been asked to do the same. So I'm mentoring a couple of people in our organisation too, which is fantastic.
And that's open to who?
So it's a graduate program. It's relatively limited at the moment, but it's something that we want to grow. But we only have a small handful of graduates today, but we'll see how that develops.
Any age limit on that, Rob?
It's a question I can't answer, Chris. I don't know the answer to that one. I need to find out with our HR team.
No, so I was thinking about it.
I think you might struggle to get in, to be honest. Yeah, you might struggle.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that one, Rob. Going back now to the Abu Dhabi days, okay, and you got two lads, James and Alex, and obviously they spent quite a bit of time there. Yep. And Laurie, your wife. Yep. If I was to ask her, what does she think you should change? Mm-hmm. What do you think she'd say?
It's very simple, and I'm sure most people are in the same place as well. Turn your mobile phone off. Stop putting your nose in your laptop at the weekend. And be present with the family instead of being somewhere else. And for me, the work that we were doing in Abu Dhabi, we were growing something, We were growing an airline, and it was hard work. And when you're responsible for a global network, there's always airplanes in the air. There's always cargo on the ground to be handled.
Yeah.
And I tend to want to get involved perhaps a little bit too much, particularly on the operational side. So there's always things to do. So nose buried in a laptop and always on my phone. And even when I was at home, to a certain degree, I wasn't, because I was focused mentally elsewhere. So that definitely would be her challenge.
Yeah.
And you've asked her that question before anyway, so you know.
Yeah, I know the answer. But it's consistent. Most of the people that are in positions, it's because they're so committed to what they're doing. And but every now and again, maybe all of us, we should just take a little reflection and do something out of the norm, or.
Correct.
And that's why it's so important to have succession and youngsters who can come in. Not because they've got more energy, but to let them see how difficult it can be. And then the bigger the team that you've got, the less.
And you have to trust your team. And sometimes that's the hardest thing as well, when you're so passionate about something, so passionate about getting it right, so passionate about winning, that you have to trust other people sometimes, and you have to let it go. And sometimes you have to let people make mistakes, as long as it's not a big one. But you have to let people make mistakes and learn from that. Somebody told me that a long time ago. I can't remember who it was.
That's it. And enjoy and learn. And that's the only way you learn and get better. But another thing I remember now, and it's something that bothers me a little bit, social media.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a great thing. But it's having such an effect on some of the youngsters. And it's also rolling over now into the workplace.
It is. What's the bit that worries you about it?
No. Well, for me, is the way they feel that they have to compete, and they become very, very demanding, or their expectations shoot up, or they feel that they're not successful, or they feel that they're not as good as somebody else, because whether it's one of 10 or one of 20 contacts, they're all going into a restaurant, they're getting a new car, they're buying a new house, they're going on a holiday, they've got a new job, and they don't see it as a big group. They see it as what they have to compete against. It's true.
And I think that the other bit, the reason I asked you the question, what's the bit that worries you about it? What I've seen is that people, as soon as you put something out on social media, it's out there. It's very difficult to delete it, and it's not available any longer. And for some young people, certainly one slip or one word in the wrong place, or one statement incorrectly put out on social media, potentially that can ruin careers, straight away. So for me, that's the bit that's worrying a little bit about it.
I'm a little bit older now, and I've got long left, so it doesn't bother me
don't
anymore.
care what you put out.
No, but I agree. But it also reminds me of, I remember when the two boys were quite young. And they loved the old the iPads, and I remember once saying to you, "Got to get them out doing a bit of sport, get them out doing it." And then you were telling me that you needed a bit of social time. You wanted to take Laura, and I kindly offered to babysit.
You did. And did we take you up on that offer? I'm not sure we did, actually.
No, you didn't, Rob.
We didn't.
And it deeply hurt me.
Yeah. Well, so my wife is very very precious over the children, as you would imagine, and we did have one particular babysitter in Abu Dhabi. The only person that she would allow to babysit our kids was a friend of ours, somebody that you know as well.
Yes, Chrissy Beale.
Ex-soldier. I used to have to spend quite a lot of money on a very expensive bottle of wine, and to persuade him it was the right thing to babysit our kids. But James and Alex love him, so he would sit there and play the Xbox with them and entertain them. But you have to be an ex-soldier to babysit my kids, unfortunately, according to my wife.
But they would have got to love me, Rob. You
I'm
told
sure
me that
they
I would have frightened them to death.
I'm sure they would, yeah. But I'm sure you would have worked out how to tell them how to make baked beans on toast and work the microwave. Yeah,
no problems. Rob, now coming back to the challenges that you've got now, what would you say to somebody who has taken up a new position and a senior position, especially with the way things are going now? What would be your sort of little toolkit or your guidelines, to say, look, when you take up a new position, whether it's in a new company or probably even more importantly when it's in your existing company, what are the things you need to be aware of when you first take over that position?
I guess it depends what the position is. Is it operations? Is it commercial? Is it something separate from that? But I think if I focus on you're taking up a senior role and you're accountable for parts of the business, you need to get round. You need to see the people that you're going to be working with, the people that are going to be working for you. You need to spend some time with them to understand what they're doing, what their expectations are. If you've got businesses that are in different airports around the world, that as many as you can get to go see firsthand what goes on is going to be a huge benefit to you as well. I go back to my father, who used to tell me that he used to walk through the warehouse every morning on his way to his office, and he'd have a chat to the team, and he'd find out what was going on, and then he'd meet his management team, and sometimes you got a different story because he was on the floor and he was talking to the guys. So I've always tried to do that as well, and I think that would be the piece that I would say would be the best piece of advice. Get amongst the people, get amongst the teams, and find out what's really going on.
No, that's good. I think that's sound advice, Rob. Now, again, what sort of frustrations do you have now within the industry? So, you've now been on the carrier side, and I remember, and sometimes it makes me smile. You look at how much pressure we put on the suppliers when we were working together for the various companies, and then when you're on the other side of the fence, on the ground handling side, I must admit, from empathy, sympathy, it's a tough role, that one.
It is tough. Yeah.
So what frustrates you now,
Yep.
as a ground handler, when you're having carriers, do this, do the other? And we were both in a session here at the conference where we were talking about the cargo handling manual, and consistency and alignment and doing things the same way.
Yep. So you're right. Airline and handler is different. Having done both twice, that I can definitely say for the handlers that are out there, it is the toughest. What frustrates me, so I guess what we're trying to achieve as Menzies at the moment is part of the strategy that we have for our cargo business, is to try and standardise what we're doing across the world. It's a bit of a thankless task. Perhaps it's not ultimately 100% achievable, but for our customers, our airlines, we want to try and give the same level of service wherever we handle them. And it's actually very difficult to do that. And trying to do things like having the IATA Cargo Handling Manual, being part of the Cargo Handling Council, trying to standardise things that we're doing is really helping that. But at the same time, the frustration is with some of the carriers that we're talking to, they're not necessarily recognising what we're trying to achieve from a standardised perspective. It's still, we need to do our own audit, we need to send our own people. It's slightly different for us, so you just have to adopt that. In some of the markets around the world, they want us to continue operating with their own system, which doesn't allow us to put synergies into place in some of the locations that we're handling them. So that's probably the frustrations. It's trying desperately to implement standardisation, but coming up with barriers against that wherever we go at the moment.
But I can say openly, I'm going to say it anyhow, but it's crazy, huh?
It is crazy.
You look at the analogy we used in the conference with cockpit crew and surgeons.
Yep.
If something is the best practice, that's what they do until there's an improved best practice.
Yep.
And everybody does it the same way.
But I also think it goes back to what we were saying before, where we're talking about people, we're talking about new people coming into the industry. If we continue on the path of promoting people because they're good at handling cargo, they're going to end up in more senior positions with the same preconceived ideas as to what we've been doing for the last 20 or 30 years. So if we have fresh blood and new ideas coming in, I think that's going to start to change the mindset.
Yep.
And people will realise that we need to do it a little bit differently.
Yeah. And how do you think we spent time with Andre and Brendan and the guys from IATA, and I've got a lot of respect for those two lads as well.
Yep.
But how can we sort of speed it up and not wait for another disruptor to come in and show us how to do things? But how do you think we can speed it up? What could we do very, very quickly?
I think, without speaking in sort of generics, if we take the example of IATA's cargo handling manual, I think that's a great tool to get us to a position where we're standardising. So we've adopted that. Menzies have adopted that across all of our locations, 34 airports, cargo airports. I think that's something that we just need to keep pushing within the group that we have within IATA. We need to make sure that people are selling that message, we need to make sure that people are driving that this is an expectation, it's not a hope, it's an expectation. And that's the mindset change that we need to have as well, even if it's just within the group that we have today. And then we start trying to influence others beyond there as well.
And I've got a concept which I call the MAT principle. Okay, the man at top. And I think
you've got a number of concepts, if I remember rightly. You've got a number of acronyms.
Wait until the book comes out, Rob. Wait until the book comes out. But where I'm leading to is when you have discussions with senior parties and everything, everybody seems to have the same outlook, and they're reasonable and they understand. But then once there's an agreement or once there's a principle in place, and then it has to get passed out to local management units, that's where there's the changes, because they say, well, yeah, that's okay, but I need it done this way. I need it done because of this, or I don't want this to happen again. Now, how, and especially now in your position, how are you going to make that consistency of the Menzies way or the Menzies formula, how are you going to make that now synonymous with the name? So like the Starbucksification or McDonald's or whatever you want to call it, so that wherever anybody goes, they know if I have a Mocha, Rocker, Toca, Robbo or whatever, they know exactly what they're going to get.
Well, that's the basic principle of the cargo strategy that we put together about 18 months ago, that we've been rolling out ever since, and where I talked a little bit earlier about the frustrations about putting that into place as well. So that's our principle. It's standardisation. I think. So I'm now in a new role in Menzies, newly created within the executive team. Part of what I was doing before, I could advise people in our warehouses on what we should do, and with the way that we're structured and our organisation, I could advise, but I'd then have people that needed to go away and talk to their line manager to see whether we could do that. So in the new role that I have, I've got the ability to walk into our warehouses and instruct people on what needs to change. So that, as you know, in any organisation, there's some people that support change and some people that need to be persuaded it's the right thing to change.
Oh yes.
So in the new role, I have the mandate to go and do that. So that for me is really exciting.
And I'm sure anybody that will be listening or knows you're coming, they're going to be excited as well, Rob.
Excited is perhaps not the word.
They're going to be engaged and excited, mate. Waiting for the man in the rented suit to turn up.
There you go.
And I'm saying that because, and fair play to you, Rob, you've got a great sense of humour. The reason I'm saying the man in the rented suit is when you're speaking or you're on a stage or whatever, and you're looking around and sometimes a crowd takes a little bit of warming up. It's always nice if you see somebody that you can rely on to speak up. And for those who don't know what happened, Rob was in the room and I was asking questions, and I said, and what about the man in the rented suit? And you always respond with good humour and you take it. And to counteract that statement, you're probably I would say you're probably the second best dressed man in the business. No, don't go there. Not today.
So my assumption is that you are the best dressed man in the business.
Actually, no.
Really?
Actually, no.
Okay.
No, but seriously, you're always well turned out. You always give a very, very professional picture of whoever you're representing, and especially yourself. And I think that's also something that people need to appreciate as well, because if you've got a certain style, it also takes you to a different level as well.
My uncle was a tailor in used to work in Savile Row. So when I first started, he did make me a suit that I've still got.
The pinstripe one.
Pinstripe one, yeah. It doesn't fit. Doesn't fit at all now. But I felt $1 million.
Rob, it didn't fit then, mate.
It did. That was a proper suit.
Yeah.
But no, I felt $1 million walking around in that suit. So I've always tried to match that. I can't afford Savile Row suits, but it's nice to wear a good suit.
You will do soon with all those bonuses, Rob. The Savile Row suits will be coming out. Now, another thing. What do you do in your spare time?
Do you know, somebody asked me this question a couple of months ago. It's actually our chairman asked me this question. He said, so when you're not at work, what do you do? And do you know, to my shame, I was a bit stumped because I've been so focused on work. And I used to play football a lot. And my knees have given up, so I can't do that. So I then started running a lot, and my knees have really given up, so I can't do that
I was
anymore.
going to say, that's wise, wasn't it?
Yeah, so I can't do that one. And our chairman asked me that question, and I was stumped. You know, I thought, you know what, I spend time with the children, and I enjoy family time at the weekends. But what else do I do? I wasn't really sure. And then I realised that I don't do really very much the passions that I have anymore. And so one of my passions is music. When I was younger, when I was doing shift work, I used to DJ quite a bit. I
remember.
That's what I enjoy. So I've dusted off a few old records, and I sit in my bedroom and I play my music and I DJ to myself, and I'm quite happy doing that.
There's a thought.
And bedroom DJ.
But you also support the football team, so they got a pretty big game tonight, haven't they?
I'm a little bit nervous at the moment, Chris. Nothing about having to talk to you and expose the inner workings of my brain. It's more about the fact that are Arsenal going to beat Chelsea tonight in Europa League? So
any forecast?
I would like to think that we will be victorious. There's a lot riding on this game because we could qualify for the Champions League, which we haven't done for a few years.
Yeah.
That will determine what players we buy in the summer and how the squad's going to go. So there's a lot riding on this. So I'm hoping for a sneaky 1-0 victory.
I think it's going to be 3-1 to Chelsea.
I knew you would say something like that as well.
No,
so you're about to upset Alex, my youngest boy, as well. So he's now a big Arsenal fan.
Is he?
And so he's allowed to stay up tonight to watch the match with his dad.
I'm thinking more of poor old Bob Bingley. Back to Bob.
Yeah.
Do you know, I remember his 50th birthday, and I had a couple of contacts, and I got him a signed Arsenal shirt, England shirt from the Arsenal trio.
Yeah.
And I went along to, I think it was Stoke Poges, was it, where the England team?
Yeah,
I think.
yeah.
And I went along there, and I met, it was Seaman, Tony Adams, and who was the left back or the right back? Dixon.
Yeah, Lee Dixon.
I got to say, the three of them were absolutely superb.
Yeah.
And they got the shirt signed up, and it was for Bob's 50th.
Yeah. So I went to the old Arsenal Stadium at Highbury, and I was a kid, must have been 7 or 8. Went with my dad. Bob was there as well, and he for some reason managed to get us into the players' lounge. So Pat Jennings, who was Arsenal's goalkeeper,
yeah. What a legend!
Pat Jennings bought me a Coke.
Did he?
So that was my claim to fame.
Now, talking about sports and trophies, we've got to come back to this trophy that had to be given back. So tell us the story about the trophy.
Well, that shaped my life a little bit, I have to say. And until I told you the story a few years ago, I didn't realise how much that's actually shaped my life. And it's actually two stories as well. So I was I used to play a lot of football, and I must have been about 9 or 10. The team I was playing for we were in a cup final. And I had a stinking game. I played really, really badly, but I was desperate to win a trophy. I always wanted to win a trophy with a footballer on the top kicking the football, and I didn't have one. I didn't have any trophies because we hadn't won anything. We actually lost the cup final as well. But on the when the game finished, they called out for player of the match, and they called my name out. And the trophy was a footballer on top of on a plinth, and I was absolutely ecstatic. And went and got changed, and I had the trophy next to me. My mum and dad took me home, and I'm sat in the car, and I'm cuddling the trophy. Went to bed, trophy's in the bed with me, and my dad came up and he said, "Son, I've got to tell you," he said, that's not your trophy. He said, "You didn't win that." And I kind of looked at him, and all the tears welled up. And
I'm sorry, I shouldn't be laughing, but
so what happened was I'd worn a different number during the match. So when they looked at the match program and matched up what they termed to be the player of the match with the number, it was me, but I was wearing the wrong number. And the guy that actually won it was my sort of nemesis from a sporting perspective as well. We used to go to school together, and we were really close, but he'd always just beat me at snooker or tennis or running or anything. He'd always just pip me. And he was player of the match. So I won a trophy, and then it was cruelly snatched away from me. And then the next training session, I had to shake the hand of my arch nemesis and hand over the trophy. So that was a tough one.
But if your dad hadn't have said it,
so I now discover, having spoken to my dad about it quite a bit, that there was frantic phone calls between him and our coach and the father of the other kid, and they all said, "You can't take it away from him. You can't take it away." And my dad said, "No, it's the right thing to do. He didn't win it, and another kid did, so it has to go."
That's John, eh?
See,
hey, that's a toilet moment, wasn't it?
It was.
And what's the other one? The other one about
so the other one, fairly close to that in terms of timing. So I used to run quite a bit when I was a kid as well. I used to do the 100 and 200 metres, and I ran the 200 metres in our school championships, won it by a mile, got the county record, and now our PE teacher was really excited about it, and I got entered into the county championships as well as a result of this. And about a week before the county championships were due, they remeasured the track, and the track was 10 metres short. So I didn't get a 200-metre county record, and I was significantly slower than most of the other kids that were in the final as well, because I got allowed to go into the final. And I turned up in my white plimsolls, and all the other kids were in their running spikes, and I came last by miles. So those two stories have shaped me quite a little bit. So I always wear the right footwear wherever I go now.
I know. And, yeah.
And I like winning trophies.
And I'm sure you're going to win many, many, many more, Rob, with Menzies. And like I said, it's not because we've shared so many moments together, but I've always been impressed. I've always enjoyed working with you. Always knew that you'd go on to very, very good things, and I think there's even more to come. And I think
me welling up now as well.
I think Menzies are very lucky to have you back for the second time. And we had a session with Mervyn Walker.
Yep. Yeah,
and he's a character. He's most definitely a character. We had a great time.
100% character. He's only been back in the organisation, said similar to me. You know, kind of rejoined after a few years away. But he's got an amazing energy and an amazing approach to things. So
yes, and I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm glad to see him back. He was good.
Yeah.
But there's one story he didn't tell on the air, and he remembered me and him 30 years ago in a discussion over a pricing situation. And Mervyn's a man, he likes the old jackets and the clothes and everything now than he is. And he's got his Errol Flynn little beard, but he looks good. He looks very good, and he's still motivated, still as hungry as ever and energetic. But he remembered that he was writing something in a Mont Blanc pen.
Yeah.
And I said to him, if you can afford a Mont Blanc pen, you can afford to give us a better price.
Yep.
And I remember him looking at me, but I don't remember what his thought process was, but he shared it with me, and he told me where he'd like to shove that Mont Blanc pen at the time.
I could imagine him saying that as well.
Yeah.
As we both know.
But no, he's a character, so I'm sure the pair of you're going to be very, very successful there.
Yeah.
Now, as we finish, Rob, anything you want to ask me? Anything you want to?
I don't think so. All the things I'd ever want to ask you, Chris, I've probably asked you already. So.
No, but honestly, it's been a pleasure, and I mean it again. If anybody out there is thinking of how to go through their a career and how to overcome certain challenges or opportunities, when to recognise it, I would always put them in touch with you, Rob. I think you're an excellent ambassador for anybody coming into this business, and you've done so well. And I look forward to seeing many, many, many trophies being awarded to Menzies and to you in particular. So good luck with everything. Now, the title of the book.
Yeah.
Okay, so I've now changed it a little bit to The Trophy Man in the Rented Suit.
The Trophy Man in the Rented Suit.
Yeah, so I think
I haven't really got any choice in saying I disagree with that, have I?
Not really, because that's how it's going to show. That's how it's going to show.
Exactly. I think that works.
No, but really appreciate it. All right. Good luck with everything. Thank you so much for coming on. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what would you suggest is the best way?
So email is probably the best way. So robert.fordree@menziesaviation.com. Happy to talk.
Good. Rob, pleasure.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks very much indeed. Thank you.